Hello students, I am very glad to welcome you to the EPG class and share with you some of my experience in this area of gender, social development, women's participation and the environment, the global environment and the national environment. I am Dr. Sarla Gopalan. I started my career as a lecturer of economics and then went into the Indian Administrative Service and served there for 34 years. And I retired finally as Secretary to Government of India, Women and Child Development. This 34 years of my service gave me a very good insight into social development issues and what government can do, what government cannot do, what the society can do, what the voluntary organizations can do, what the community can do. So I want to share this experience with you as part of this course on committees at the global level, at the national level, and how they can come together to create a very conducive environment for social development and gender justice. So I am going to talk about that to you in this chapter, and I am sure you will have a lot of experience of your own in this area, and therefore you can try to match this with what I am going to tell you today from my experience. You know, in India we have a very rich tradition where women are even worshipped as divinity, Lakshmi, Saraswati, Durga. We have also our scriptures, Manusmriti and even from Bhagavad Gita, it has said, Yatra Naryastu Pujyante Ramante Tatra Devataha. Where women are respected, Pujyante here is not really worship but respected, there reside the angels, the gods and the divinity. Therefore, the importance of the woman in the household and the way she is treated has been given a very high position in our social attitudes and in the social behavior of everybody in the family as also in the community. Unfortunately, today's situation is absolutely very different, and maybe we could even say so unsafe to be a woman. There are various factors to this, and the whole battle, not only at the national level but at the global level, has been to establish the dignity of women, the dignity of woman which she has to understand herself, and the dignity of the person which others have to understand and respect. In the early ages of our existence, as civilization was developing, anthropology has it that both gender, man and woman, across the biological sections in all beings, found the female of the species stronger, dominant than the male. Therefore, biologically, even amongst the human species, the woman is stronger, and this has recognition in some ways in some parts. But with the growing of these social institutions, things have changed and given an unequal position to women, and this has been realized world over in all ethnic groups, in all regions, in all cultures, and then cultural standards have emerged where the equality of the sexes has not been maintained. There has therefore been a strife to change this situation and give women a status that they deserve to have. They, if not superior, at least they have to be equal in every way and not suppressed and not dominated upon and treated with violence and dissidence. They have to be given importance as they deserve. It is true, they also have responsibilities and duties towards the society, but that environment has to be created where they can perform their tasks very well to their satisfaction, maintaining their dignity without being subservient to the male of the species. Unfortunately, what has happened is, in our recognition of the family, the family is the place where you bring the continuity of generations and also the passing of the property, particularly private property, through a lineage. Women started realizing that they are not being treated equal by their male partners, and therefore they started fighting for it. They wanted the right to vote, the right to take decisions for the betterment of the community, not only be confined to the family. Of course, they had this very important responsibility of childbearing and bringing up the children, but that did not mean that they should be excluded from the community, and therefore for more than a century they fought in the United States for getting the right to vote. If I must tell you, this strife became very apparent in the Western countries from the 18th and 19th centuries. Women started realizing that they are not being treated equal by their male partners, and therefore they started fighting for it. They wanted the right to vote, the right to take decisions for the betterment of the community, not only be confined to the family. Of course, they had this very important responsibility of childbearing and bringing up the children, but that did not mean that they should be excluded from the community, and therefore for more than a century they fought in the United States for getting the right to vote. After the World War I, where women had participated equally in the World War, they had been nurses, they had taken care of the wounded, they were everywhere, and they were not given recognition even in the Parliament of Britain or in the parliaments of any of the other European countries. Therefore, they started the suffragette movement, and the women leaders like Pankhurst fought for women's right to vote, and then Britain gave this right to the women. Now, subsequently, in fact, why am I saying about the right to vote? Because you control, you govern a community through your legislature, through your government, and there, if the women's voice is not heard, then administration cannot be just and take care of the women. And therefore, this right to vote became a very important symbol of women's right in the community to participate in the governance of that community and that nation. Later, if you look at the series of various things that have happened in the world, the global environment has been changed by women's organizations, going to the highest institutions that have been formed, and through them to get the rights for which they have been agitating. The most significant institution in the world that got established after the Second World War is the United Nations. It had a predecessor, the League of Nations, after the First World War, after 1920, and then in 1946 the United Nations got established in order to end war and for the nations to come together, dialogue, discuss, and bring out codes of conduct for all state parties to deal with their communities, to bring democracy, justice, equality. And therefore, the United Nations Charter is almost like the Magna Carta for human rights and for women's rights. And the United Nations Charter has all these written down, and from then on started the recognition of human rights, and women's rights are human rights. Therefore, women's equality becomes a right that women have to enjoy, along with their responsibility to bring up the family, take care of the family, and also contribute to the economy through their occupation and employment, and add to the national domestic product. And women have been working very, very hard. But then we have seen discrimination in wages, in positions, in education, in their care for health, their access to skills, in their access to opportunities, in their access to resources. In fact, the entire global community has been so concerned about this that the constitutions that have come up after the United Nations Charter have made it very important to increase the Constitution. India, in its preamble, talks about equality, justice, and liberty, and women's rights. The fundamental rights enshrined in the Indian Constitution talks about the equality. Each country, particularly India, has been closely following all the global conventions on human rights, on equality, on avoiding, eliminating discrimination, and on establishing peace and security. And there is a legion of all these conventions listed out. I can give you the list for your reference. It starts with the establishment of the Committee on the Status of Women, and the the International Human Rights, Universal Declaration of the Bill of Rights, and then the most significant is the CEDAW, the Declaration on Elimination of Violence against Women, and then various other treaties, international establishment of international treaties, labor standards, and then other conventions and declaration. Now, in order to administer all this, the United Nations set up the Division for the Advancement of Women, known as DAW. And then UN Commission on the Status of Women in 1947 which has been following the performance of all its member states. I must say that a big part has been played in establishing these bodies by the non-government sectors, because women in the community who are not participating in the government have been asking the governments, their leaders, to establish these kind of organizations which can monitor and see that what is promised is implemented. First of all, you need a promise, you need a convention to be established, and the convention should have all the provisions that you would like to have in your social contract, and then you want a body to see that whatever is in the convention is brought in law and practice and is implemented in all the member states. Therefore, the Committee on the Status of Women, established by the United Nations, has a very important position, particularly in the context of gender justice, and has been doing enormous quantity of work. Practically every year it meets and then asks every state to come and report to it on what it has done. And we have been making a lot of legislations, not only because they said it, because the women's movement in India has also been insisting on making several legislations, modifying several of the old legislations which were in vogue right from the days, the imperial days, which followed many of the laws that the British government had then formulated and helped India formulate. And those changes, legal changes in the statutes, have been made in India, and we should thank the guidance given to us by the example and precept of many of the other countries. So today in India we have a whole bunch of legislations, monitoring organizations. In fact, the Department of Women and Child Development itself came up only because so much agitation by the study of the Committee on the Status of Women in India, which found that there was no authority to look at what women needed in this country. The legislators thought that with the constitution saying equality, automatically the society recognized that and women became equal. Now, when the Committee on the Status of Women in India studied the conditions of women and made its report and looked at statistics, data, the first thing they found was against the biological requirement, expression of more women to men. That is, for every 1,000 girls there would be 1,005 boys born, because the male of the species is not that strong. There will be some loss at the infant stage, and therefore to be equal, the boys would be, more boys would be born, and thereafter there would be equal boys and girls in the society. But according to the data, statistics, the Committee on the Status of Women found that in this is called the sex ratio. How many women to 1,000 men? In this data they found that there were less than 1,000 females to every 1,000 males. Now this was an anomaly, it was against nature. And when they went deeper into this sex ratio, they found that the girl child was neglected right from infancy. Entire health care for women, entire education for women, entire skill development for women, entire opportunities for accessing well-being, economic stability and social security was absent. With the result, women were dying at all ages without care. This is what the Committee on the Status of Women brought out. And then they said there has to be a National Commission for Women, there has to be governmental organization look after the various needs of women. In fact, at global level, it was India which brought out that the sex ratio is an indicator of the status of women in a community. In fact, Veena Majumdar, who was secretary of the Committee on the Status of Women, was awarded by the United Nations for bringing out this factor. Thereafter, over the years, since the report of the status of women, India has had various studies done, various programs, right? Of course, even before the Status of Women Committee, there were efforts like the community development, where women, Mahila Samajams were formed so that women could come together, and also there were small grants given to them for conducting some kind of awareness programs for better health, better nutrition, and so on. But they didn't look at how everything worked. Between 1950 and 1975, and this report was placed before the Parliament in 1977, and after that only some action started. Of course, right from 1952, a Central Social Welfare Board was formed in India, which was looking into women, weaker sections, disabled persons. Now, one of the complaints of the women was that they were being clubbed along with the weaker sections and the disabled, whereas they were able, they were as much responsible and as much capable as their male counterparts, and that was not being recognized. Therefore, they needed a good infrastructure of education, skill development in order to take up greater responsibilities in the society. Through the programs of condensed education, etc., the Central Social Welfare Board tried to provide some amenities. It took a very long time. 1990, 1995, by the time, of course, the landmark in India's program on gender justice is the 6th 5-year plan, where they devoted a whole chapter for women's development and also culled out a number of programs. Now, it was found that the amounts allocated for women were inadequate, it was not being spent, and there was not enough machinery to implement all the programs that women required, which caused the lagging behind of women in all these sectors of education. Whatever you may say in each policy, for instance, the education policy gave importance to the girl child. The health policy said they will give importance to reproductive health, and simultaneously women were fighting for getting position, getting a responsibility of decision making. So it was only in 1993, with the amendment of the constitution, the Panchayati Raj was introduced, where it was one of the provisions was that every panchayat should have 1/3 of its members as women. This was a big change and a revolution in the history of women's empowerment and leadership in this country. Later, this has been increased to 50%. But what we have still not achieved is getting a 30% in the parliament and in the legislatures. Men, the parliamentarians, are not willing to pass this legislation, this amendment to the constitution. It has to be an amendment to the constitution to reserve 1/3 of the seats for women, and that struggle is still going on despite various committees of the parliament, select committees of the parliament recommending that women should be given 1/3 of the votes in the 1/3 of the membership in the parliament. Why 1/3? Because you require a critical mass of persons to move, to bring any change. Today, it is not that men don't understand women's problems, but for men to understand women's problems the way women know about their problems, you need a good force of women to be there to bring out the change. And that's why women want, and this is that United Nations have recommended, that you should have a critical mass of members in the parliament so that these changes can be brought about in governance. Because wherever, we have seen this by example, wherever you have had a panchayat president who is a woman, 1/3 according to the constitution amendment of the panchayats, 1/3 of the presidents have to be women. And many of these women presidents in the local bodies have found that they have changed the content of governance at the panchayat level. They have changed the content of governance at the corporation and municipal levels. What is that change? They found that women need good water for their family, and therefore they have concentrated on works relating to water supply. They have concentrated on work on infrastructure building like roads, lighting of roads in order to avoid danger and risk and insecurity for women when it is dark. They have brought about schools. Every woman knows that the school has to be close to the community, to the house. Only then the girls can go to school. So I know of many panchayats which has furnished their schools, where taken care of good teachers being appointed in the schools, bringing the markets closer to the homes, making it safe for women to live. Finally, I would like to conclude saying that what a very good society requires is an understanding of the needs of all its members, men and women. And unless you have the women's point of view, it is not always possible to get everything that women require. Because you see that if there is a war, it is the women who are exploited and who are raped and who suffer. And if there is poverty, it is the woman who gets a bigger part of that poverty. Therefore, it is important to make life secure and make women capable of earning and contributing and saving both economically and socially the members of their own family. That is why we are going from the global level to the national to the panchayat level to talk about good governance that has got to take a very impartial and practical view of not only the practical needs of women, but also the strategic needs of women by making laws conducive to their well-being, conducive to their equality, conducive to their dignity. You do not want, when I say dignity, I am saying you should not exploit the body of the woman through advertisement, making her as a toy of amusement. You should not be raping girls as your leisure activity. These things are happening, and that has got to be changed, and we have to work very hard towards changing the entire mindset of boys and men, as also girls and women, so that they look at themselves with greater dignity and respect and confidence. What is required is confidence to look at themselves as a person capable of doing things and delivering good services to the community. Thank you.